Good evening, everyone. So, today's international relations articles can more or less take over from where we have left yesterday. It deals with the concept of power, multilateralism, the context of multilateralism, and the whole issue of globalization. So, we are not going to restrict ourselves just to this one article written by Mr. Shashi Tharoor. Rather, we would be looking at the whole debate about whether the globalization as an idea is ending. Okay? And there is another article in the Hindu. I don't know if I placed it. No, I forgot to place it, but similar idea about immigration laws. All of them are tied down to economics. They're tied down to more or less the same things that we have already discussed, power and the concept of multilateralism. Okay? So instead of starting at multilateralism, let's go back to the topic of globalization. Okay? Let's start. Okay. What is globalization? Like I told you yesterday, whenever there is a word that ends with ism or Asian, ism is an ideology, Asian is a process. Okay? So globalization is a process that tries to integrate various countries in the world. In its simplest way, you can understand globalization as a process that brings people together. This is the time of 80s and 90s. The promise of globalization is just about to take off. What is this process? To understand that, we have to go back to our article where we discussed about that global debt. In 70s, there was an issue. Every currency is pegged to gold. But after that, that system was removed and a free float, market driven mechanism was promoted. So, if regulation is removed, people started printing more and more money, and in exchange, they gave bonds. This debt was exported somewhere else. If you take the global economy, if you know the balance of payments, if somebody is borrowing, somebody should be paying it up back. And this should balance out. Somehow, this was not happening. And that is the whole context in which globalization as a promise came out. What did this promise say? No matter where you are, what product you need, if I have the capability to produce it, I will ship it to you. Any guess about the major proponent of this method? China. China wanted to exploit as much as possible through an export driven economy. Okay? So what happened as a result? This is India, for example. Before 1991, there is a strict entry barrier. You have to take licenses if you are a foreign company. Now with LPG, liberalization, privatization, globalization, the reforms therein, that barrier was removed. What happened? It led to a free flow of, freer, relatively free than 1991. We still have some controls, but across the world, the trend is that economy started opening up. Now this theory was promising that we will grow. Did the global economy grow? Yes, for almost 40 years, until the bubble has burst in 2008 when the global financial crisis in the form of US subprime lending recession hit the first, it hit the European markets and the trans-American markets, and eventually it spiraled out into rest of the world. Because China was having more and more US dollars, it was able to save America. But now, ever since 2008, this globalization as a model is just not working out. So people are showing some resentment. Why is it not working out? See, the promise of globalization is that we will all have more money. Yes, cumulatively, it brought a lot of money into different economies, but it also did something else. It amplified inequality. Imagine a town, let's say, for example, a town like Kanpur, which was in the pre-LPG era, a good industrial town. Any town that is well connected to the railway networks, ever since the colonial times, they were also industrial hubs. But the problem is, they were not efficient. With the influx of this cheap Chinese goods, what happened? These cities got decimated. The industrial economy of those towns, especially in the small and marginal, micro industries, that got decimated literally, which created a sense of inequality. Not only that, access to land, one of the major factors of production, was inequitably taken away from the poor people. So this is not a uniform phenomenon again. More or less, technically speaking, market acquired lands, but this created a problem also. I'll tell you an example. You know the infamous 2012 Nirbhaya rape case, right? So the families of the accused who were residing in that colony were at one point of time farmers in the very lands that they are now working as watchmen or drivers, janitors, etc. What did this lead to? It led to a social fraction. This social fraction has created a sense of inequality and resentment. If this is the case in India, what makes you think it will be any different? Okay, in India we might be earning some X. Let's say in a country like UK, they might be earning 2X in 2010. But still, the difference between the different classes will be extremely high. And that has been the problem of globalization. But across the world, what is the kind of political power? Democracy. How do Democrats actually, anyone, I'm not talking about the American party, anyone who believes in the idea of democracy will try to acquire as many number of voters as possible. In a desperate bid to attract voters, they were doing anything that will facilitate their win. If you see the case of South Asian economies, you will see the so-called freebie model of governance. Why is this freebie model of governance prevalent? Thanks to the global economy and the globalized world, India saw an influx of investments in FDI. Now, as much as we can say this created inequality, it also facilitated more tax revenue, either directly or indirectly to the government. The role of the government is to redistribute it, right? So instead of again investing it back on people, instead of focusing on the so-called capital formation, most of the governments went for a shortcut. That shortcut is nothing but the so-called freebie model of governance, where we are pushing the consumer-led growth. If you want to buy something, government directly puts money in the hands of the people. Now, at one point of time or the other, if you don't work on your basics like health, education, skills, quality control, democratic outcomes, policy making which is responsive and data driven, nothing but the basic stuff. If you keep on ignoring this, what will happen? It will lead to erosion of capital, which is exactly what is happening right now. Does it mean that it is only because of we not sticking to the basics? No. It is a situation across the world. To say why I am saying that, you have seen more than 100% plus decline in FDI inflows last month, as per the latest data. Why is this happening? The country is not seen favorably by investors. Not just India, lot of economies are facing a similar problem. So what is the alternative investment? Safe investment? Gold, silver. And therefore, they are seeing a rise in the costs. What does globalization and economy have anything to do? It's always about money. Globalization is always about opening up the markets. Every other factor is just a secondary impact. Whether it is exchange of culture, whether it is exchange of ideas, people interaction, new intermingling of cultures, exposure to different radical ideologies, faster spread of social media, internet driven economic models. All this are primarily led by liberalization, privatization, globalization with a single point agenda: profit. Is it wrong? Obviously not. What is wrong? The benefits not reaching everyone. Inclusive growth. And it is difficult to achieve inclusive growth in a competing economy. So this economy will also decide the political alliances. I am only talking about one country. What if the companies are actually driving the democratic elections? Therefore, this economic models will indirectly have a relation on democratic elections across the world. What is the fundamental assumption about democracy? That the election will be free and fair. When a global company is trying to distort, it is neither free nor fair. This is one dimension of the problem. Let's go to the rhetoric that is involved in the present deglobalization phase. Globalization was supposed to give us jobs, but no FDI is coming, no new businesses are coming. So in Western world, especially the developed world, the whole idea of immigration. What is immigration? Immigration is a process which facilitates a legal exchange of people between two different countries. And if there was any talk on the problems of immigration, it was only in the case of illegal immigrants. From there, which has been the responsible force behind US becoming the most richest country in the world, from there, now we are talking about completely stopping immigrants so that Americans can get the job. If that was the case, why did they allow outsiders in the first place? Because they felt that the talent pool of Americans was not enough. As simple as that. Now, are they wrong in sending us back? Not necessarily. It is their prerogative. What is wrong here is India not being ready for that influx. It is in this context we will have to discuss how the governments should handle this wave of anti-globalization agenda. One of the method is talking about multilateral talks. Like I told you, globalization ultimately deals with money. If two companies come together and exchange goods and services, there will be a flow of money. If that is not happening, you will not see any exchange. So, yesterday we were talking about how the global forces do not have a authority to control them. Therefore, nations should come together and create one centralizing authority. That centralizing authority was WTO, World Trade Organization. That is also not functioning. Why? US exited. The appellate body or the court that tries to solve these disputes is just defunct because members are not actively participating. This is the background. Now, what is the article saying? Because WTO is not functioning, when the 80th anniversary of UNGA, UN body, which was supposed to safeguard peace and collaborate for a consensus-led growth, it is not exactly working as per the established ideals. Why do you think so? Because the premise of cooperation is globalization, and globalization depends on flow of money. That flow is not there because of global debt. That's problem number one. Economy is fundamentally changing its shape. We are seeing a structural shift in our economy. Climate transition. We are moving away from the fossil fuel led industry to e-vehicles or anything that is greener. That is the shift number one. Why? Because we don't have an option. Otherwise, climate change will literally end life on earth. So we have to move in that direction. That first structural shift is that climate change led initiatives. Second is with respect to technology, AI. We are seeing a technology that is unlike anything else that humanity has ever seen. Can you tell me the fundamental difference? See, the argument many people give with respect to any new technology, they give some comparisons. You ask anyone, they'll say, like, way back in 80s and 90s, even bankers resisted computers. But look at the digital banking today. Everybody is, taking up digital banking. Fair enough. But understand the nature of AI. Unlike anything in the past where technology is just speeded up the process, it increased the efficiency part. There was no cognitive element involved there. Decision making was still taken by human beings. Now, the level of decision making and the level of automation where human mind and human presence is required, that is also taken away from human agency to a large extent. Yes, technology is a level playing field, and yes, I will also be very optimistic in saying that we will figure out a way. But that is just what it is, optimism. Is there a logical ground in saying that we will figure it out? Not really. At least not at this moment. So, here we are. Globalization, deglobalization, global level institutions not working, the challenges of globalization, and here is where, if all the global level institutions start getting disrupted, what alternative do you think countries will have? They will come together in smaller groups, or they will come together in a bilateral relations, or they will just fight wars. This is what is happening. So the multilateral world as we knew it, it's changing from a bipolar world led by US and USSR, followed by the rise of US and then ascendance of China, creating multiple power centers, has disrupted this narrative that multilateralism can be a solution. Why? Yesterday also we were seeing, previously, regional powers like Turkey, Saudi, Bahrain, they did not intervene in local issues because the big brother, US, was always intervening. Because they wanted to give democracy to all the oil producing nations. That's a different issue. Russia was also driven by its own agenda. India did not involve because we were non-aligned. All those assumptions are fundamentally over. So, is it safe to say multilateralism is dead? Not necessarily. That's what Shashi Tharoor says. See, when will the globe come together? When you have a win-win scenario for everyone. And it's possible, according to Shashi Tharoor, provided we are talking in terms of justice. What is justice? Common but differentiated responsibility in every avenue. Vulnerable sections require more equity in handling these problems of multilateralism. Unless we try to fix that root problem, multilateralism, as we know, according to me, has fundamentally ceased to exist in the way we knew it. This is my assumption and this is my reading of the situation. Shashi Tharoor, of course, is a very learned man. He says that it is not the case. But I didn't see any logical ground in that premise. It is just wishful thinking without an agenda or a mechanism. You cannot say it will just sustain the way it is. You have to reimagine the entire circumstances in which multilateralism, as we knew, should continue. We are no longer interested in the same level of talks. Correct? Now, for example, if you want to create a legal framework for regulating AI, do you think a law that is just made in India will suffice? What if I create content from, let's say, a mutual extradition treaty-led countries? Like, I am legally safe there. I will produce some synthetic AI content and produce a deepfake and release it before elections. By the time the technology providers figure out where it is coming from, the damage will be done. Yes, the borderless world is getting closer and closer. This is the irony. On one hand, politically we are moving away and away, but technically and in the cyber world, we are getting closer and closer. And this paradox is what is breeding the current level of dissatisfaction amongst the Gen Z, as we can see in multiple countries. Whether it is Bangladesh, Indonesia, and then Nepal, many countries. What are the lessons for India? Go back to the basics. I don't want to indulge in any slogans. Any young guy or a girl, if they have a job to do, I don't think they will come out onto the streets to protest. Whether it is a good idea or not, ethically, to keep them busy but not productive in jobs, that's a completely moral debate, but it's the bare minimum essential necessity for establishing order in a society. On that note, we'll move to the second article. What EPFO numbers reveal? Something that is related to the first article only. What is EPFO? Employee Provident Fund Organization. What does it do? It takes away part of your salary and stores with it for almost good enough time till your service ends. If you remember it, good. Otherwise, it will be lying in the bank accounts. But ever since 20 years ago, almost, government decided to move away from the pension schemes. What is pension? After retirement, government employees used to get a part of their salary for their sustenance even after retirement. That stopped essentially after 2004. Any government, central government I'm talking about, any central government employee who joined before 2004 will get it. Why do you think the government took this step? Imagine if you are in the 100th year of independence, 2047. For whatsoever reason, a person who retired in 1990, a person who retired in 91, 2011, 22, 32, 42, you have to give them all pensions. Where will you get that money from? It's simply not sustainable. And this is the context of social security schemes coming into discussion. What do you mean by social security? Yes. After the age of 60, do you really think most of our parents have enough savings? Did they plan for that savings? Not much. There is this culture where all that money is invested in their kids. So this is a economic as well as a social problem. On one hand, it is difficult on the state's exchequer to give so many pensions to so many people. And on the other hand, any instance of apathy towards parents where they are abandoned, that becomes a social problem. Now if you dig deep, it will even go from a sociological standpoint about the nature of relation between parents and children in the previous generation, this generation. So unless you are ready to handle that kind of debates, the state has a better alternative, and that better alternative is to mandate EPFO, where no matter what your salary above 15,000 is, a small percentage of that is taken away and put in a corpus, which you will get after a point of time. There are two components: this savings that go into the provident fund, as well as many other elements like gratuity. What is gratuity? Let's say if you work in a company for more than 5 years, it's a form of a token amount which is fixed again at the time of joining by the company as a token of gratitude. This is gratuity. All of this corpus will be ideally withdrawn by the candidate at the end of his career. But the problem here is people are withdrawing it early. Their money, their wish. What's your problem? Same problem. What will happen to the people after 60? So, what happened here is EPFO tried to restrict this withdrawals and said that I'll put a minimum balance that you're supposed to maintain. Otherwise, I'll penalize. This opened up a very heated debate. How can you do this, etc. Now, imagine the plight of the government. On one hand, this old age crisis and the debate that probably will involve Gen Z kids also. Government, I'm pretty sure, is not interested in having that debate because they can't have a debate. And it is difficult to solve that problem for the entire country. Right? So, how do we deal with this? This is the article. If there is any update, we will cover this again. Self-reliance in solar physics. What should you take away from this article from a science and tech standpoint? law of conservation of energy. What is it? Energy is neither created nor destroyed. So if it is neither created nor destroyed, where does it exist? It should exist in some reservoir. As far as Earth is concerned, what is the largest reservoir of energy? Solar energy. The energy that we get from the sun. If there is any debate about it, imagine a day where sunlight doesn't reach Earth. You will know what will happen. So sun is both the provider of life and also disruptor. Why disruptor? Because on the surface of Earth, you will see some powerful radiations, whether it is the coronal mass ejections as they are called, CME, or solar flares. These happen because of the lack of, we are not able to figure out why these are happening. This is because we do not completely understand the electromagnetic radiation and the energy loop that is within the sun's photosphere, and also in general, sun as a star. What happens because of this disruptions is we depend on satellites, whether it is internet, communication, or any kinds of service right now is contingent on how efficiently our satellites are functioning. So till now, to get this data, we were depending on someone else. India decided to go Atmanirbhar. We want to have less dependency and try to figure out the entire solar physics ecosystem. In a bid to do this, we have a mission called Aditya L1 mission. What is this L1? Lagrange point. Simply put, there are some specific points in space where the influence of different gravitational bodies is nullified. So if you position your satellite in this place, you can safely observe various celestial bodies. And India placed its Aditya L1, the entire observatory at L1 with an objective to observe space, specifically sun. A possible prelims question. This has various telescopes from multiple frequencies. Okay? These multiple frequencies correspond to different energy levels in a electromagnetic spectrum. What is electromagnetic spectrum? What is the frequency of light? Visible light. Okay, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll briefly explain what is electromagnetic spectrum. If you denote energy of different kinds, the nature of that energy, how powerful they are, you will see various kinds of energy on this line. X-rays, gamma rays, infrared rays, ultraviolet rays, all these different kinds of rays will have a corresponding frequency. And there is a physics law where energy is directly proportional to the frequency and inversely proportional to the wavelength. What is this energy, wavelength, etc.? See, if a wave is compressed, imagine a wave is compressed in a very small area. And light wave passes in this manner. Frequency will be high if you compress it. So it will have a lot of energy because you are tightly compressing it. It wants to, disperse. But when you're talking about loosely packed, energy will be less. But the benefit is these waves will travel longer. Using this physics principles, we will be indulging in communication, understanding the universe, trying to identify different objects in space, and see how we can manipulate this laws for the benefit of mankind. This is the takeaway from this article. So you will also see an experiment called ARIS. What is that? What problem is it solving? That is a homework. I want you to go back and read that. I've already posted that article on the channel. You can go and read it. That's it for the day. Thank you.